When I say something like, what are the best 3D platformers on the N64, your brain immediately races to Mario, Banjo, Donkey Kong, but don't get me wrong, those games are legendary, and each one holds a special place in my heart. But expand your mind for a minute and get ready to learn about an underrated platformer that I honestly believe holds a small, dimly lit candle up to these legends. Oh, and it stars none other than the Looney Tune himself, Daffy Duck. I believe I originally rented this from a local video store called Movie Gallery, just because I like to go and try random games sometimes for a weekend. I ended up loving it so much my dad was like, we probably need to get you this one. And for some reason, either due to limited funds or not being able to find it in stores, my dad never got it new. But we did manage to find it at another local movie rental store, Hollywood Video, from $19.99 to purchase. I don't know about you guys, but taking trips to the rental place and finding some sweet pickups for cheap was always awesome. I knew if we went and I found a game there, more than likely my dad would let me get it. Except for this one time they had Conker's Bad Fur Day, and I begged him to get it, and my mom said I was too young to have it. Well, look at me now, Mom. Anyways, I digress. I acquired this game and have played through it many times. It's one I bring up time to time, and most people look at me like, there's an N64 game of Duck Dodgers, and it's a platformer? Oh boy, is there ever. So sit on down, grab a little snacky poo, hit that subscribe and like button, and gird your loins, because here comes my analysis of
Duck Dodgers in the 24th and a half century!
The game was developed by Paradigm Entertainment, who previously had worked on some little titles, Beetle Racing Adventure, and Pilot Wings on the Nintendo 64. It was then published by Infogrames and released in the year 2000 after being delayed for a year. It's based on the 1953 cartoon Duck Dodgers and the 24th and a half century, which itself is a parody of the series Buck Rogers in the 25th century, a sci-fi epic. The plot centers around Marvin the Martian creating an ultimate weapon to destroy the Earth, but it unfortunately needs the power of these green radiating atoms that are scattered around the galaxy. He sends his goons out to go out and collect them. Our hero then receives word that Marvin has made a weapon and we need to recover the atoms so he can't unleash his weapon on Earth. So we venture off with our trusty Porky Pig, aka Cadet, and travel planet to planet, defeating Marvin's goons, collecting atoms, and eventually defeating Marvin himself. And all the goons, by the way, are based off other Looney Tune characters. There are also a few other cameos throughout the game. The rest are friendly NPCs though. Some character highlights include Elmer Fudd, who's a pilot of a flying saucer on Yosemite Sam's prison ship. This big red guy shows up and apparently his name is Gossamer. I had no idea. Lola Bunny pops up in every level to give us a free life if we find her, and there are tons of little cameos throughout the game, totally worth paying attention to. Unfortunately, heavy hitters like Wile E. Coyote and the Roadrunner only appear as textures on a wall. And the same for the most famous Looney Tune of all. Let's talk about that gameplay. The game is a 3D platformer reminiscent of Banjo Kazooie and Rayman 2. I can't help but feel they had the benefit of hindsight being at the tail end of the N64's life and giving us cool gameplay elements from some of the best 3D titles on the console. Daffy has a pretty standard 3D platformer moveset. He can run, double jump, kick, do a ground pound, and swim. The swimming mechanic is almost identical to Banjo Kazooie, so I have to give kudos here because I actually think it feels a bit better than Banjo in that regard. Daffy's also a fast swimmer, naturally. If you press the R button when running, you flip to a tiptoe mode where the sound effects align with your steps and all other music stops. I actually really appreciate having a slower, more precise walk being a toggle button. It does help, and you can do a little hop if you need a bit of speed. He does have another sort of strange maneuver that isn't really a move per se. If you press R when in the air, Daffy flaps his arms and legs. Honestly, I'm not exactly sure the application of this move. It doesn't really seem to offer anything other than maybe a sort of jump cancel, and maybe that's exactly what it's supposed to be. I'm a little unsure though. The overall basic movement of Daffy feels pretty good. The only real complaint I have is the camera controls can be a little unforgiving at times. It's a straight up use the C buttons to move the camera, and it can be centered around you with the press of one button specifically. The camera controls overall okay, but sometimes it just wigs out on geometry and can cause frustration on tense platforming sections. If it happens, you'll quickly recover just after. Don't let this be a deterrent for you. I just felt like I needed to mention it because it does happen time to time. Getting a nod back to what I mentioned earlier about piecing together other platformers elements, this game has sliding sections much like Rayman 2. And now I love Rayman 2, and I'll say those sliding sections are far superior, but Daffy did them sparingly, and they are actually pretty fun. I think it's a neat nod to other games around that time. And the same can be said with a certain instance in the game where you actually transform into another creature. Or two. The first being this bizarre flower seal alien creature thing. If someone knows what it is, please drop it in the comments. This creature has no abilities aside from running and barking. The second transformation, however, is a chicken. This one was actually really fun because even though you move slow, you could jump and flap your wings with a sort of glide down, and there's this room with like pinball mechanics. It's insane. Oh, and you fit into tiny spaces. These transformations are short-lived and only really in one level, but it's still silly and present nonetheless. Another nod to Banjo Kazooie is the health system, where the meter actually reflects Daffy's mood as it goes down or up. A nice little touch. I love when games do this. What's present in more levels than the transformations are certain items Daffy can utilize to progress and explore. We have rockets and jetpacks which function the same. Daffy puts them on as you press Z to launch yourself as far as it'll take you. You can always release so you don't overshoot. You also have in one level a disguise where Daffy can put it on to look like aliens and pass the security bots and other aliens. I love this item, but it only makes one appearance. And sort of off the coattails of this, there's a distraction decoy item that you can throw that pops up a cardboard cutout of Daffy that will summon the attention of enemies around, like the giant abominable snowman. There's also a vehicle to drive. It's basic, but you use it to travel between sections of space. It moves with the joystick, and the Z button gives us afterburners. You have other things like bouncy balls in the form of a red one you can actually play fetch with a little dog here, and a section where you play basketball. One mini boss fight is a boxing match and sees us using a classic Looney Tune boxing glove gun. This is legendary. And finally, probably the biggest item, which is the ray gun. This blasts enemies and shoot targets. There are even some sections of the game where the gameplay shifts into a first-person shooter. It's kind of crazy, but it works, and they offer a sliding mechanic, so the controls feel pretty good. And a lot of the levels have gimmicks that pop up. Probably the best ones coming from Planet X. This is certainly a world where tons of interesting stuff happens. The transformations, a lot of weird items, all happen here. Follow that up with rooms that have slow motion effects, low gravity, hyperspeed. I mean, it gets wild. If all that sounds like a ton for one game, that's because it is. Every setting and environment in the game is completely different than the other. On that note, let's talk about the worlds we visit. There are 5 worlds in total. Each world carries 20 atoms. You'll have to explore them thoroughly and overcome various challenges and a boss on every world to get them all. We start with Planet E, a planet being mined for resources, possibly atoms. It starts off as a mining area with carts and caves and then eventually takes an Arabian theme toward the end. We find ourselves wandering through an Arabic mansion, and then the boss here is Hassan, who will come at you with his big sword. We have to wait until he smashes it into the floor and gets stuck, and then we can kick him around. General enemies in this level are little grunts that are mining and some of Hassan's goons. We do have a really cool sequence with a giant worm though. It's epic. Follow this world up with Planet J, which is a downtown city with tons of entertainment. You can find a video game arcade where you can play a variation of Pong, a library where you have to be sneaky and move bookshelves to get out, a museum where we find a ray gun to blast our way out, and at some point there's a maze too we have to navigate through. And don't forget, a boxing ring where we challenge the mini-boss of the world, the Crusher, which is a really fun fight to me. You get that boxing glove gun and basically just avoid him until you can smack him right in the face. It's very satisfying. There's even a point where you're underground and you have to run away from this giant mechanical mouse. It's pretty epic. The final boss of this world is the mob boss Rocky, who we play hot potato with bombs. The general enemies of this level are really security guards. They have little ones that blow their whistle and chase you fast, and big ones that will grab you if you don't get away. The ray gun often will stop them in their tracks. After this world, we travel to Planet N, or rather, get captured on the prison ship where the boss is Yosemite Sam. This world really reminded me of Rayman 2. We start in prison in the ship and have to escape. It's a fun one though. You'll have to navigate through the ship with its engine room, strange layout, and including some special secret pathways to make your way up to Sam and take him out and escape. That boss fight consists of running around the steering wheel of the ship as Yosemite tries to shoot you. We hit these switches and a bomb shows up, and then we have to throw it at him. It's honestly easier said than done. General enemies here include a lot of robots. Once Sam is defeated and we escape, we crash on Planet P, which is an Arctic snowy planet with tons of caves to explore. Just watch out for that abominable snowman. He'll grab you and want to cuddle. There's a fun slide minigame where you try to go as fast as you can to get some atoms, and I found exploring the caves in general pretty fun. The final boss here is a giant Easter Island looking stonehead. I mean, sure, It's a wait for him to break all the floating platforms and stand on the only one that doesn't fall, and that hurts him. Probably the worst boss fight of the game, honestly, but I appreciate its uniqueness. Not too many other enemies here, just some temperamental penguins, really. And then finally we hit Planet X, which is Marvin's home turf, and filled with tons of experimental chambers and space travel tunnels. We hit up a mini-boss that's a giant robot chicken, and the final boss is, no surprise, Marvin the Martian, who we can blast with our ray gun, and eventually foil his plans. Don't let his dog distract you though. This has to have been my favorite level. It had so much variety and just wacky gameplay mechanics. Every corner was filled with something different and weird, and that's reflected in the enemies that show up too. Egg bots, jetpack guys that steal stuff in front of you, these Martian bird things that are slaves to Marvin, and also a very small mechanic that exists in this world and the previous Planet P are these X's on the ground. If we step on them, Daffy holds up a sign and we get hit by a snowball or an asteroid depending on the level we're in. It's pretty funny, very Looney Tunes. In general, each level certainly has a unique atmosphere and layout. The gameplay variety is present in every single level, and some of the items we get take on special cosmetic looks depending. I really appreciate how wacky and ridiculous some of these worlds get, and we can fast travel between the worlds at any time, and there's some high quality Looney Tune animated cutscenes that happen as we travel. They replay every time, and you can skip them if you'd like. The whole Looney Tunes aspect of this game actually makes it better. It's fun to see all these familiar faces in a different setting, but still retaining the classic Looney Tunes humor. Daffy himself is animated and fully voiced, and it's just awesome. You'll come to appreciate his voice lines when collecting an atom. For me, it adds to the charm. And that's something I always look for in these platformers, and it's nice to see it's here. The general graphics and style of the game look pretty good. I'd say visually it's about on par with Banjo Kazooie, maybe a bit less colorful, but pretty good looking. And the sound design? The music's pretty decent throughout with a couple standout tracks. Certainly things like the tiptoe mechanic with its unique sound effects that come in add to the experience. But from characters to the world, it's rich in Looney Tunes sound effects. Classic cartoon explosions, hits, bangs, slaps. It really does feel like an episode of Looney Tunes. And my overall time with Duck Dodgers was so much fun, just like I remembered. I had a blast exploring and playing around in areas with weird gameplay mechanics. The items were just so much fun to use, and I found myself watching every cutscene and enjoying them every single time. The platforming can be a bit tricky at times, but this isn't really a long game with a steep collectible quota. You have a respectable 100 atoms to collect in total, with 20 being in each level. It sounds like a lot, but so many atoms are very easily collected, just like sitting outside waiting for you to grab them. You also don't even need to collect them all to defeat Marvin. You can, however, collect them all to get an alternate ending, where Marvin just wants to use his weapon on something, so Daffy gives him the go-ahead to use it on something other than Earth. And that doesn't really feel right, but it made me laugh. I managed to beat this game in a little under 5 hours, so it's a pretty short experience. But honestly, Duck Dodgers is a platformer that is super fun. Not super long, but it has a lot of charm. It's a shame more people haven't experienced this. So if you love the N64 and platformers, this is one you should definitely go check out. It's totally got my seal of approval. Well, that's all I have for you. Be sure to drop a like in this video to support my content and smash that subscribe button so you catch my future uploads. Until next time, have a good one.